Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ASPRS Mentors podcast. I'm Greg Stamnes, the chair of the ECPC, and we have with us today Jordan Hicks, the vice chair of the ECPC. Jordan, you want to say hi?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I'm Jordan, and I'm the vice chair of the Early Career Professionals Council and vice president and Lidar specialist at a company in North Little Rock, Arkansas. And I'm really excited to be here today. Thanks.
Thanks, Jordan. So our guest this week is Karen Schuckman. Karen, do you want to start by giving us an overview of your background and how you got to where you are today?
Okay, well, I mean, this could go on 3 hours by itself, but I started out, let's see, I was always kind of like strong in like math and science, but I couldn't really land on I couldn't really decide what I wanted to do when I grew up. And when I'll answer this question later on, but I also competed in athletics when I was in college, and that was, a little bit of a distraction. So I went back to school when I finished. I went back, got another undergraduate degree in meteorology, and I never really wanted to be a weather forecaster, but I enjoyed meteorology is a very mathematical science, actually. Long story I'll skip over, but the job I got in meteorology was more of a research programming, the computer programming type job. My job title was computational physicist. And then from that, I sort of got introduced to remote sensing. I took some classes at UC Santa Barbara in physical oceanography, which I enjoyed because it was like the math of oceanography is very similar to the math of fluid dynamics and meteorology. Through that, I got introduced to remote sensing. This is still back in the day when, all the satellite data was on big 9-track tapes in a vault somewhere. And then again, found myself a little bit later on trying to figure out what I had young children. I was becoming a single parent. I was like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do to survive and take care of myself. And I happened to be living in Fresno, California at the time, and I went to Cal State Fresno just looking for what degree can I get that will get me a job when I am done. And I started out, I looked at geography. They were getting rid of their graduate program, so then I went over to civil engineering, where they had sort of environmental engineering, thinking water resources. That sounds kind of interesting. And when I went over to talk to the dean of the College of Engineering, and he started asking me about my background and so on, and showing me the course catalog, and there were all these classes that I picked out that I thought were interesting, were all part of the surveying and photogrammetry program. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just do that. And I really thought I was going to be a surveyor, and be out in the field and cut brush and set up tripods and so on. And I had, we were required to take photogrammetry. And Dr. Mungie, who many of you may have heard of at Cal State Fresno, and Dr. Hussein, he's retired for a while ago, they sort of got a hold of me and said, you really need to learn about photogrammetry. And my first exposure to photogrammetry was, in the lab with the old stereo plotters and glass diapositives. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, who would ever want to do this? They were like, just wait, when you learn the analytical photogrammetry and the math, it'll all make more sense. It'll be more appealing. So that was really what got me on the road. And I'll maybe touch upon this at other times throughout this discussion, but probably the most significant thing that happened was that I went to an ASPRS student chapter meeting at Cal State Fresno, because we had a chapter at the time, and there was some very active supporters. I don't know if you guys know who Alan McCooney is. He's still active in ASPRS. He was a president a few years before I was. He's still active in the Pacific Southwest region. He and several of the people at USGS really supported the Fresno surveying and photogrammetry program, and they came to one of our picnics at the end of the year, and they were going to have a job opening, which was a big deal at the time because it was hard to get a federal hiring position open. And they said, "Oh, you should apply for this job," and so I did, and here I am.
That's great. I wish I had a Dr. Mungie when I was in school, because it was really surveying focused and everybody had their laser focus on that. And we took a few photogrammetry and remote sensing and GIS courses, and it was like, oh, that's kind of that other thing, but you're going to be a surveyor, and
Yeah.
So I did that for years, and then eventually I was like, I like this better.
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that really clicked for me of all the surveying classes that I was taking was his class in least squares adjustment. I don't know, maybe, it's my mathematical background, but that really, that just really clicked for me. And then it was, then analytical photogrammetry. Those two classes probably of everything that I've ever done since in my career, probably that was the real, that was the seminal foundation for me. It was learning about least squares adjustment, and everything else kind of followed from there, which is probably why I'm still kind of, a positional accuracy geek.
As many of us are. So externally, it always appears that you're exuding confidence. And this is, and I say externally because maybe it's just external. And particularly when addressing large groups and public speaking, and we're just wondering, where does that come from? And did you have to train for that, or was it always there?
But it certainly wasn't always there. I'll tell you, when I read that question, I thought, my undergraduate degree at Penn State, there was a class that was required, Speech 101, and in that class you had to get up and give 3 5-minute talks during the semester. And I completed everything I had to graduate, and I had not taken Speech 101. I was terrified. I actually had to stay and should have graduated in the spring, and I had to stay and take Speech 101 in the summer. And it was totally traumatic. I made it through it, but I guess it was no. So it did not come naturally to me at all. And I also was I was an only child, and I wasn't really well socialized when I was in my early years. So just being up in front of people was kind of terrifying. But I don't know. I thought when I read the question, I thought what. I think what really happened was I went through a period in my life in my 20s after I graduated from college, and I was in that sort of transitional period before I got into surveying. And that period of time, I went through some pretty difficult personal times at that point. And I had to really getting out of that difficult situation and getting out on my own, sort of, going to school, going to Cal State Fresno, getting the job at USGS, that kind of, that was sort of my exit out of that difficult situation. And I think I found, I don't know, it was sort of, I don't know, that just having to do that, having to put myself out there to support my children and so on, it just kind of cracked open the shell, I guess. And now I feel when when I speak in front of people, or maybe, the confidence that I appear to have, I think as long as I'm talking about something that I feel passionate about, and I feel confident that I understand it, I don't really think about, well, what are people going to think of me, or how are they judging me or anything. It's like, this is what I know, this is what I have to share. And I'm, yeah. So, but it definitely was a journey, and I didn't like train for it. I didn't like take classes or, but it was more just like the necessity of life experience and survival.
Well, that's good to hear. I think we always assume that the leaders within our industry or within our organization just have this natural ability to speak and lead big crowds, and so it's good to hear that we can all work towards that.
You just be surprised what you can do when you have to.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah, you didn't have a choice. So this
and again, I will say, ASPRS, my, experiences starting out as a student and then getting involved in region leadership, division leadership, all of those experiences really, and all the people who supported me in doing that, and all the mentors that I had, believed in me. So I was like, okay, well, if these people believe in me, I better believe in myself.
Well, that's awesome. So this next question is about being a woman in a non-traditional or male-dominated industry. Is that so? When you were around, like when you first got into the geospatial industry, were you like the only woman around, or like what was it like back then as opposed to now? Has it changed over the years?
Oh, well, actually, when I got into even the surveying program in Fresno, there were a reasonable number of other women.
Oh.
By contrast, when I was in graduate school at Penn State in meteorology, there were, I think, 60 graduate students, 4 women out of 60.
Oh.
So, yeah, and I guess, okay, again, I grew up, like, I went to college in the early to middle 70s, when feminism was, it was that time. And I remember I didn't really identify with it very much. I thought, like, I don't know, partly it's like the way I grew up. I never really felt
different.
Right. Or I never really felt hindered in
yeah.
Maybe also because, I don't know if many of you know that I was a gymnast. So I was an international level gymnast. I was on the US team in like the early 70s. I went to the Pan American Games and I was an alternate for the Olympics in 1972. So I was competing in a sport, it was a women's sport. And I guess, certainly, in gymnastics, everyone's more, at the time in the 70s, no one even knew what gymnastics was, but then it got popular, and now of course it's very popular and everybody knows what it is. But you have to go out in front of a large crowd of people, scantily clad, and and perform, and there's and you're going to fall off the beam, and you have to get back on. So I don't know, all of that was much more, whether you're a woman or a man doesn't really matter. I had it was more about just like, as just a human individual person, human being, individual person being in those situations and having to develop those skills. I didn't really focus too much on my gender. And I just really never focused too much on it. And I feel like, as I mentioned, I think when I got into the geospatial world, there were actually, far more women than there were in my previous life in meteorology. And then, I think I was the 4th woman president of ASPRS. There had been a couple of sparsely interspersed over time, and I was the 4th. but immediately after me was Carrie Cron, Cass Green, and Marguerite Madden. So there was that, I got elected, and then the next, there was a time when all 4 officers in ASPRS were women. And that was kind of cool. Yeah.
So do you have any advice for aspiring future women leaders in the industry or within ASPRS?
Well, I guess I do. I don't know. Maybe this isn't really great advice, but really just try not to focus on that gender aspect. Just be confident in what you know. Be good at what you're good at. And I think another reason I feel I chose this field, and I felt like I was always really happy in this geospatial field, because I felt like most of the people that I dealt with were very fair-minded, decent people, rather than, I know there are a lot of other professions, like over time you go, well, I could have been a doctor, I could have been a lawyer, I could have been a this, I could have been a that. But I feel like I felt really at home in this environment, and I felt, again, very supported by mentors, men and women alike. So I think just focus on that, and don't really. I'm not saying that there isn't discrimination, and I'm not saying that there isn't, there aren't issues of pay equality and all of that, but I don't know. I tend to look for where, focus on what's positive and not really, just kind of try not to focus too much on any of the negative.
I think it's really good advice. When I think about, like, if I were to develop an all-star geospatial team, I wouldn't consider gender, I would consider skills, and it just so happens that most of the really skilled people I work with are women. It would probably be a 50-50 split, but it wouldn't be on purpose, or it'd be because they're awesome at what they do. So.
Right, and in our field also, we're very diverse, ethnically and culturally as well. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, what are some of the most effective ways of networking within this industry?
Well, my go-to has been ASPRS all along. That just getting involved. I got involved very early on, and I became the assistant director of the photogrammetric applications division, kind of by accident. I had gone to an ASPRS conference because I got a scholarship. That was my first conference that I went to. I was awarded a scholarship. I went, and I had a couple of older people that I knew that took me around. They took me to committee meetings. At the time, everything was face to face, right? So they took me to the GPS photogrammetry committee meeting, where I met all of these people who I had heard of, great people. And they were just so, okay, it was a room full of probably 50-something white guys, and they were so thrilled to have a young woman in the room. They were just like, what can we do to get you to stay here? Get you to be part of this. And it just continued. I got involved in region leadership, and always had something that I was doing within ASPRS, and that really, again, it was time when it was, there was a lot more face-to-face. There wasn't social media. We didn't even really have email until the 90s. But yeah, going to conferences, being involved in like the local, regional, and national organization. That's what worked for me.
Did things move slower back then without email? Like, I never even thought of that till right now. Like, how?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even have cell phones. Like
Yeah.
you had a phone on your desk. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely things moved a little bit slower for sure. I mean, we would have, there'd be we used to have 2 ASPRS meetings a year. We'd have like the one national meeting, and spring meeting, the big annual meeting. But there was always a smaller fall meeting. So there were really 2 opportunities a year.
How can young professionals stand out from the crowd when submitting resumes?
Yeah, I saw that one too. And I have I'm just going to sound like a broken record, but I never got a job by sending anyone a resume. You have to network. When you send someone the resume, that's because they already want to hire you and they want the resume to give to HR to show that because here's the person I want to hire. You're not going to get picked out of a pile of 100 resumes and somebody's going to go, oh, look at this person. I mean, I guess it happens that way, but it never happened that way for me. The networking was the key thing. When I wanted to make a job change, like I said, my first job at the USGS, because they came to that picnic and they were looking to for somebody to potentially hire for 2 people actually. So that was getting to know them personally and then saying, hey, apply for this job. And then after let's see. Yeah, I think every time I was interested in making a job change, I just started letting people know and thought about what opportunities are out there, who can I talk to, who's who would I like to work for, like I made a lot of friends, and so it was never really that. I wasn't just randomly responding to job ads. In fact, when I got the job at Penn State, that was, they were looking for somebody, but they also kind of made the position for me when I said that I was interested in coming. Said, yes, we want somebody to teach remote sensing, but beyond that, they kind of let me decide what I wanted to do with the program. So, yeah, and I have been lucky also that I had a chance. I worked in the government sector. I worked at USGS. I worked in the private sector mostly for Earth data, and then later for URS, which became AECOM. So I had that private industry experience, and then the academic experience at Penn State. So I've been really lucky to be able to, stand on each of those 3 legs of the stool that make up, the ASPRS community.
I like that response. Like the way the question is worded, it might be like, oh, make it colorful, put your picture on there, bold, like all about your resume, but you went straight to networking. So that's awesome. That's very interesting.
They're going to hire you, not a piece of paper. Right?
Very true.
Yeah.
So what are your top time management skills that help you balance a busy schedule?
Probably, I thought about that one too. So probably the biggest thing, and I have multiple jobs. So, I was teaching full-time at Penn State, doing the ASPRS executive director, and then doing some consulting here and there. So I've always had a lot on my plate to get done. And I think people ask me that all the time, like how do you get it all done? And it's because I work at home and I literally don't spend any time driving anywhere. I don't travel very much. I don't spend time in my car. I don't spend time at the water cooler, or hanging out, which probably is not good for my social skills, but I like working, and I get up in the morning, I go 20 feet to my computer, and I get started on my day, and then I take breaks kind of randomly as I need them. I don't work a very 9 to 5 kind of schedule, and I don't I mean, you can ask my children and my husband. I just kind of work all the time.
I was going to say, do you start at 3 a.m. and go to bed at 2 a.m. or anything like that?
No, I'm not that much of a morning person. Like I kind of have to get, I wake up, I get a cup of coffee, I do some email, I gradually wake up, but I'm, kind of like maybe I'm not a real morning person.
So how do you stay pleasant with all those pressures of all your various
I was like, who wrote that question? Because I don't really, I feel like a lot of times I don't feel like I'm very pleasant. I'm always telling people what to do. And, I think I had a kind of like I'm trying to, just a friend at one point who said at one point, it's really good that, when we all want to like study mysticism and be like enlightened and all of this kind of stuff, and want to read people's minds and know, be on the shit and all that. And he goes, never think about it. It's really a good thing that people really can't read your mind because you don't want people to know what you're really thinking a lot of the time. But let's see. I mean, I think I couldn't be doing, especially the work at ASPRS requires. I mean, when I started in 2016, helping out at that time during this time of transition, there were 10 people on the board of directors who were marginally engaged at different levels. The regions, there was not much happening in the regions or even the divisions. So growing that leadership team from maybe 20 people total to the 100 and almost 200 people that are now actively engaged in the leadership. I mean, they have to want to be with you. They have to want to help you. They have to want to be part of the organization. You have to. So I don't know if it's a matter of being pleasant, but it's giving people something that they can like hang their hat on and hook their own passion to, so they feel like they're part of something that's bigger than just them. And then, okay, then we all have our good days and our bad days, and some days we're cranky and some days we aren't pleasant. But I think by and large, we in the ASPRS leadership family, whatever, we appreciate each other a lot, and appreciate the work that we appreciate the work that others are doing. And I think hopefully you feel appreciated as well. And that makes it feel good. When I'm not working, I'm usually working at something else. So I wanted to sit outside so you could see where I live, because I have like an 8-acre little farmette. So that's what I have. I don't grow anything. I am not a gardener, but it's a lot of mowing, and I ride around on my tractor and my 4-wheeler, and I have 9 horses. So, there's always something to do. And I like it because, the minute I go out there and I start riding around on the tractor or brushing a horse, it's similar to when I did gymnastics. It's like you're not really thinking about anything else. You're just thinking about you're in that moment, just doing that activity. And that's, that kind of gives me the mental break, but also I need the physical exercise, because we sit at a desk all day long otherwise. So that, I'm really I hate going to the gym, and I hate that, like the idea of going to the gym and working out. I would just procrastinate forever, but I don't mind, going out and like walking around with a weed whacker, because I feel like I'm accomplishing something. So Yeah.
That's interesting. I have almost the same mentality. Like my sister's like a gym person, and I'm like the opposite. I'd rather be building something or doing something in my yard, and I always think
Yeah.
you're paying to get exercise, and I'm doing it for free. So this is
Yeah.
actually, yeah. Um, so a good mentor can catapult their mentees and act as a catalyst that propels them. For example, a good mentor can contribute to mentees advancing over the course of a single year the amount that someone without a mentor might take 5 years to grow. So where can we find mentors, people who honestly want you to advance, not just pigeonhole you? And when we were coming up with this question, I made the comment that sometimes you get so good at your job that your boss doesn't want you to leave. They want you to stay there because you're so good at it, and they're not really a mentor at that point. So how can we see our mentors more often? How can we be more involved with them and leverage them to accelerate our career? And do we need mentors just within the geospatial field or outside as well? Do you have any outside mentors as well?
Sure. I mean, over time, like for example, I have still a very close friend. He was my professor in a humanities class that I took when I was a freshman in my very first semester at Penn State. I just liked the class, and I didn't really connect with him as an individual person until like 3 or 4 years later. I was having a little bit of a crisis, intellectual crisis. Like, I'm about to graduate. I'm getting a degree in liberal arts. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I was like, that teacher really, I liked that guy. I liked thinking about what we were learning in the class, which was like humanities for the science majors. And I went back and to his office, and I was like, I just like, I need some help. I need some direction. And, we've stayed now friends for 60 years. So anyway, that's not really answering your question though. Like, how do you find mentors? Or I don't know. This is a hard one because, I think about how do I get a mentorship program going in ASPRS, and we've tried numerous times to do that. And we have people, say, oh, fill out applications and try to match people up. What you guys are doing here in this podcast is by far the most successful thing that we've done so far, like by far and away. So you tell me, like, it was a great idea that you came up with, and you've been very consistent and pursuing people to get them to present, to get them to share their stories. I think it's the biggest thing is like we need to see each other just as people, not just as like, oh, this is, somebody who's a important person in the profession that's gonna, connect me to this, that, or the other thing. Like, we have to connect on some just make some kind of human connection. And I think I just try to think of, who are the people that I, as mentees, who are the people that I feel that I want to work with at this point in my life. Like, I'm getting older, so now I'm really, I need to think about like who's going to pick up where I leave off, and there are just those individuals, and again, mostly through ASPRS, who just continue to, keep knocking on the door, like, Greg, they're like, come and present in this podcast, or, the student, there's people like that on the Student Advisory Council as well, who are just constantly like, help us with this, help us with this, help us with this, show us how to do this. That it's hard not to respond to that. So I guess just, when you see someone that has something that you want, just don't be afraid to ask, because most of us who are, the elders, we're be more than happy to have somebody jump in and help us. So just, but it's not like, you know, again, it's the same thing that you asked me before about how do you like get noticed with your resume, or how, you know, how do you hire somebody? Like I could put out sometimes I don't know what I'm not always know what kind of help I need, you know, or what. It's kind of a more organic thing. So again, just, you know, just continue to network. And like I said, when you see something that interests you, or you see somebody that has, like, they're doing something that you want to know more about, just be like, hey, I want to do more of that. Like, can I help you? What can I do? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting getting to know, like you said, the human aspect of people. You kind of place them on a pedestal when you first join the organization or start to get involved, and then you realize, like, I'd email you, for example, and you email me back in like 5 minutes, and it's like, oh, this is just another person. This isn't, you're just like me.
Yeah, that really sums up, like I told you, when they first took me, my mentor at the time, Sean Curry, took me to the GPS photogrammetry committee meeting, and there were all these guys, you know, Lulapine, and I mean, names you guys wouldn't know, but I was just like, oh my, they're just like people, you know, they're nice to me, and they, you know, they're willing to help me, and they're, you know, let's go have a beer or something like that. When you start just, you know, you don't, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good awakening for a lot of people, I think, just to,
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about getting older and the next person that maybe will take over your role within ASPRS. So what if I want to be the next executive director? What are the essential qualities for the next person, and also to take it to the next level, to build on what you've done and kind of take it to the next level?
Yeah, I don't know, like, it'd be interesting to hear from the staff. Like, I don't know if Yuki is still here, but, you know, I've seen 4 executive directors in my time at ASPRS. And I know a lot of other organizations have executive directors who, that's what they are. They're like a nonprofit executive director. I feel like, I don't know how someone would be the executive director of ASPRS and not be in the profession. There's so much of what I do. You know, other people can do the accounting and the, you know, manage the membership database and so on. And, you know, we did, I mean, it was a very important move that we made to get the association management company to support us. But I think, you know, and again, Yuki's here, she could, and she, you know, she works with they work with other organizations also who maybe run a little bit differently than we do. I think having our board are all people from the profession, right? But each of them are only in the position for a year. And so the personnel on the board changes every year. The personality of the board changes. You get people who are, you know, they come in and they put a lot into it for a couple of years, and then they step back and go do something else. You know, the executive director is the one person who's supposed to be the constant. I've been able to do what my predecessor didn't have, was that really being committed to being part of the profession. Like, I think of many days, you know, I think about what inspires me as the executive director of ASPRS is thinking of the 12 guys in 1934 who sat around a table and decided, like, we're going to make this society, you know, we're going to make a little club, you know, of photogrammetrists, because think about it, in their time, who the heck knew what a photogrammetrist was? I mean, it's bad enough now, like, you know, people don't know this word, but, you know, for them, it's probably really important to have, you know, a couple of, people like-minded people that they could, envision what this the society of the future. So, yeah, but what does it take to do the job on a day-to-day basis? It's just a lot of managing things, I mean, I think about, like managing the budget, just like I think about paying my own bills at home, right? It's not rocket science. It's just, leading the organization. For me, I think it's been very important to go back to the core. Like, what is ASPRS real unique core value is photogrammetry, number one, right? We were first the American Society for Photogrammetry, and then we added remote sensing. But we're still, that is a very critically important niche that we have in the geospatial community. So, but I don't know, the day-to-day is a lot of, it's just whatever, it's just whatever comes up. At the very beginning, it was making sure the bills were paid. It was trying to get the website working, trying to establish a membership database. I mean, we've gotten a lot better at that. So I think, I do think about like who wants to come after me and pick up this job. You won't have to you won't have to be literally paying the bills. For the first 2 years, I wrote the checks, paid the bills, and did the payroll and everything. You won't have to do that because there's a very good support staff now. But it's really, continuing to have that making sure that ASPRS maintains its identity in the geospatial, its unique identity in the geospatial world, and being willing to just be there and help. I think one of the most important things that I did was to start those Wednesday meetings. That at the very beginning, when I took over, everything was such a disaster at that time, and no one really knew what was going on, and there had been a lot of things going on that no one was really they didn't have their eye on the ball. Like the whole financial thing just went. People weren't doing their due diligence and paying attention. Take over and basically, resurrect the organization. I was like, okay, but I want transparency. Like, I don't want anybody saying that I'm doing things behind the scene that they don't know, that they don't know about, or I'm, manipulating or taking advantage or what have you. So I said, all right, I'm going to have this meeting every Wednesday at from 11 to 12, and whatever's on the table that week, at the very beginning, it was just like, what bills are we going to pay this week? Or, what are we going to do about this conference that we're supposed to have? I mean, we were doing a lot of damage control at the beginning, but having that openness and that transparency, and that, you all know, like that 11 o'clock Wednesday meeting has gone on now for 8 years. There's nothing in my life that I have ever done with that regularity and that consistency ever in my life. And over time, not some days there's only, like today, there were only maybe 10 people at the meeting. Some day there are 30 or 40 people at the meeting. It varies from time to time, but it's like you're just there. It's just being there. It's just showing up and always having, just having something to report on every week. Just this is what's going on this week. And over time, I think it's made a lot of people feel that they can belong, that they can contribute, and that they can take up, they can start to take up some of the responsibilities. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but It's definitely a diverse set of skills. Like you need the understanding of what's going on in the industry and really like feel connected to that core mission, the technical aspect of it. But you also have to be, it's like you have to be a manager. You have to. I'm probably like one of my the things that's the hardest for me is delegating. I have like a lot of things where it's like, oh, it's just easier if I do this myself. That's something I feel like I could probably do more of. Yuki and the staff have been great, but I feel like I feel especially now because realistically it's probably 3 to 5, like the most I could probably continue is like 3 to 5 more years. I need to show, I need some people to learn what I do. So if anybody is interested and it's a lot of monkeying around with Excel spreadsheets and just collating data and figuring out how to communicate and how to analyze, some of it's pretty mundane, but it's very important. So
kind of the manager struggle is always what to delegate and what to do yourself.
Right.
So I have a few more questions here. What's your timeline like? Do you have a hard stop or?
No. You asked me about there's a question here about starting your own business.
Sure, yeah.
That was interesting that somebody asked that because I've probably thought about it when I very first left the USGS, but it's never been something. I mean, I already have so much responsibility anyway. I never really wanted, if you have your own business, you've got to be constantly like thinking about how you're going to make money while you're doing you got to be getting more work while you're doing the work you already have. And while that's still, even if you're running a company, you have to be thinking that way, right? I mean, I was kind of lucky in a way that when I went from the USGS and I got hired by Brian Logan at Photoscience, and he basically was like, here, you're going to run this company like it's your own, but you're still going to get a paycheck every week. So, it was like the best of both worlds because I had a paycheck, I had benefits, and I was a young parent, like a single parent, like that, and I still have a lot of dependents. So no, being completely running my own business has never been that appealing. But I also don't feel that the fact that I haven't run my own business is doesn't mean I don't have plenty of, like, it's not that I'm not motivated or I don't have the skills. It's just, I don't know. I like being part of an organization too. That's
that's good. I'm glad you picked that one out of the group.
I think it's hard to run your own business. That's a big commitment for somebody that has, like, when you have a family. I don't know if any of you out there either grew up in a family where you had a family business or anything like that. That's just one more level of stress that I just didn't feel like taking on.
Yeah. Have enough without it. So this one is an interesting one about LiDAR data. So there's a huge push for getting open LiDAR data. I guess public agencies are, sharing that data. What is your perspective on how that will affect small companies that collect LiDAR, and how can they invest in the technology? Although the investment's coming down, but how can they invest in that technology and that business and deal with, having public data everywhere for LiDAR?
It just really reminds me of back in the early 90s when everybody thought that space imaging, which is, digital globe, that satellite imagery was going to put all the aerial survey companies out of business. Clearly didn't happen. And, some of us were saying at the time, like, well, there are a lot of reasons why, right? Orbital characteristics, cloud cover, there's a million reasons why satellite imagery can't really always replace aerial survey. And I feel like it's the same thing with Lidar. Like, I think the more Lidar that's out there, the better. I mean, the USGS 3DAP now has, there's a lot of really good Lidar data available. And people are learning, they're learning to use that data, which is just going to increase, it's going to increase the demand for data. And there's always going to be a need for, more current data in a small area for a particular project. So, I think the fact that we have global coverage at at some resolution, at, particular, some temporal frequency, that's great. There are so many, global applications and national applications that will be driven by that will, again, continue to push the technology forward as it has, that's happened in imagery, but it's never going to reduce the demand for, I need this area flown like next week. I think there'll just be more, it'll increase the demand for it in that way, because people will be like, oh, this Lidar data is really great, but I need to know, I needed a higher resolution or more current.
And regular frequency. I guess those projects for sure. We do.
I am going to have to actually go soon because I just realized the technician is coming to repair my work computer that died yesterday. I just got a text from them.
We do have.
You got one more question?
Yeah. Well, it's a comment. Natish has one. Maybe I can.
That was a great. Sue just put up. I wanted to say that also, that these global data sets are not. That's a great. They're good source data. They're not the end products that a lot of people need. Yeah. And I'm like right in the thick of this right now in my new job. That Lidar point cloud is one thing, but engineers need a CAD surface, and that is, you don't push a button and get a civil 3D surface out of a Lidar point cloud that has 200 points per square meter. It just doesn't happen that way. So there's a lot of value added mapping, even from that open source data. I think Jordan's waving. Yes.
Okay. I guess, last question then. Natish, I'll take yours offline and I'll get Karen to reach out to you for an answer for that one. So looking back on your career, both within ASPRS and externally, what is your greatest accomplishment?
I saw that question too, and I thought about it, and I'm going to give you kind of a 180 answer on that. And that, I mean, I can think of lots of things I've accomplished, but I think the thing at the end of the day also is to just, just having a lot of accomplishments doesn't really complete me as a human being, right? I have to be, it's really about what kind of person am I? Like, what are people going to say about me when I'm not here? Or what do they say about me when I'm not in the room? And yeah, I have a long list of accomplishments, but I think it's more about, having a legacy and leaving behind something where people feel like, that they were like, inspired or helped or inspired, I suppose, to do their, to make their own accomplishments. So I think that was, I taught a lot of people at Penn State in my time, my 17 years. I probably taught, like, I don't know, over more than 1,000 students in that online program. And it's pretty, it's pretty satisfying to now run into them, not many of them, but from time to time, like, run into them and see what it is they're doing and have them tell me, like, oh yeah, they really understand positional accuracy now, or they know why that's important, or that taking one of my, that my class, like, helped them along in their job. So it's not like winning an award or winning a medal or even a ribbon at a horse show, but those are the things that there's been many times in my career when people ask me a question and I didn't know the answer to. And this is one of those questions, gets back to that thing that you asked me before about confidence. Just don't be afraid to tell someone, I don't know the answer, but I will find you the answer. Like, I had many clients who said, ask me a question, I'm like, I really don't know, but let me get back to you. Like, pick up the phone or the email and reach out to somebody through my ASPRS network who did know the answer. So again, that, like, building a network, and then the influence that empowers you to be able to do more. You're better, you can do more when you're part of something bigger than yourself. And then you also, that there's that ripple effect, right? That you're also helping other people accomplish. So it's hard to measure that or say, it's not a certificate that I put on the wall or anything like that, but I like to think that I didn't, that I do inspire people like you.
Yeah, for sure. You certainly have inspired me and had, big effects on me and my career path and many others. And it's pretty common that we have people attend our weekly meetings that, that are new people and maybe new to ASPRS or maybe not even members yet. And we say, oh, like, how did you get here? Where did you come from? And they're like, oh, some Karen lady responded to an email. So it's really, yeah, it's pretty common. So you're doing it.
Well, see, that's one of those things I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're doing exactly what you're setting out to do. So is this safe to share on YouTube, Spotify, and now iTunes, this content?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if we have any more in the chat, but I know you have to run. So
okay, yeah, I do have to go. And Stu, just tell Stu, like, you can just reach out.
Okay, sounds good. Well, yeah, thank you so much for taking part in this today.
Great, thank you guys.
See
ya.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.